Go clean, Grant Caldwell said with a laugh that echoed through Iron Summit Dojo. His finger pointed straight at the woman standing beside a yellow cleaning bucket. That's what you're here for. A few students laughed. Most didn't. Grant smiled even wider, feeding off the attention. Then he delivered the challenge everyone would remember. Unless you actually think you can fight me. The woman didn't answer. Elena Vance simply looked at him. She leaned the mop against the wall. Placed the bucket neatly beside it. Then, without the slightest hint of anger, she stepped onto the training mat. The room fell strangely quiet. Parents exchanged uneasy glances. Students stopped whispering. No one inside the dojo realized they were watching the moment everything they believed about strength was about to collapse. Some people spend years hiding extraordinary ability because peace is worth more than applause. Less than a minute after the first exchange, Grant Caldwell would wish he had never laughed. Earlier that afternoon, Iron Summit Dojo looked no different than it did every weekday. Blue training mats covered the floor. Wall-length mirrors reflected rows of students practicing combinations. International flags hung neatly above polished wooden walls. Long before the evening class reached full attendance, Elena unlocked the maintenance closet. She had followed the same routine for nearly a year. Sweep the entrance. Arrange the equipment. Polish the mirrors. Mop the training floor. Collect forgotten water bottles. Most students barely noticed her. Some had never even learned her name. To them, she was simply the quiet maintenance worker who appeared after class and disappeared before anyone thought to thank her. Elena never minded. She wasn't there to be noticed. But she never cleaned without watching. Years of disciplined training had taught her to notice details others missed. She noticed feet planted too narrowly. Punches thrown too early. Guard positions left open. Students shrink every time they make a mistake. And she noticed something else. Something far more troubling. Sensei Grant Caldwell possessed remarkable skill. His demonstrations were sharp. His technique was precise. His confidence inspired admiration. Parents trusted him. Students respected him. Yet every class ended the same way. The students who learned quickly walked away encouraged. The ones who struggled walked away doubting themselves. Grant corrected mistakes. But too often, he forgot to build confidence. Elena said nothing. She had promised herself years ago that her days of stepping onto a competition mat were over. She intended to remain invisible. Until the front door opened. A 15-year-old boy stepped inside beside his mother. Malik Brooks looked around the dojo with equal parts excitement and nervous anticipation. Naomi Brooks smiled reassuringly as they approached the front desk. Elena recognized them immediately. Neither of them knew it yet. But before the sun went down, their arrival would change every life inside Iron Summit Dojo. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories about hidden strength, justice, and people proving everyone wrong, take a second to subscribe. We share new stories like this every week, and you won't want to miss the next one. Now, let's see what happened when Malik stepped onto the mat. Naomi Brooks rested a reassuring hand on her son's shoulder as they stepped onto the blue training mats. Malik's eyes wandered across the room with quiet excitement, taking in the rows of students practicing kicks beneath the mirrored walls. This was the place he had dreamed about joining for months. At the center of the dojo stood Grant Caldwell. His white gi was spotless, his black belt tied with practiced precision. Every movement he demonstrated was crisp, controlled, and powerful. Students watched him with admiration, copying each stance almost instantly. There was no denying Grant possessed remarkable skill. Again, he commanded. The class repeated the combination in near-perfect unison. Grant nodded approvingly. Better. The students smiled. Praise from him was rare enough to feel like an award. But the moment someone's timing slipped, the atmosphere changed. "No," Grant snapped. "How many times do I have to explain something this simple?" A teenage boy quickly corrected his footing. Grant barely acknowledged the effort before moving on. From the edge of the room, Elena continued wiping fingerprints from the mirrors. Her eyes remained on the glass, yet she quietly observed every lesson unfolding behind her reflection. She had noticed the pattern months ago. Grant celebrated talent. He tolerated average. But he had little patience for struggle. That was where he failed. Victor Hale often said martial arts revealed a person's character. Watching Grant teach, Elena wondered if success had slowly replaced compassion. "New student," Grant called. Malik immediately straightened. "Come here." The teenager hurried onto the mat, trying to hide his nervousness. Grant demonstrated a simple defensive movement before motioning for Malik to repeat it. Malik copied the stance. His feet landed too close together. His balance shifted awkwardly. Grant sighed loudly. "No." He repositioned Malik's shoulders. Again. Malik tried harder. This time his timing was off. Several students looked away, sensing what was coming. Grant folded his arms. "Did you practice before coming here?" Malik swallowed. "A little, at home." Grant gave a short laugh. "I couldn't tell." A few uneasy chuckles spread through the room. Naomi's smile disappeared. Grant continued. "Martial arts isn't for everyone. Discipline can't be borrowed. Either you have it, or you don't." Malik lowered his head. I'll do better." Grant shook his head. "You might want to ask yourself whether you belong here before wasting your mother's time and money." Silence settled across the dojo. No student spoke. No parent interrupted. Only the quiet sound of a mop being placed gently against the wall broke the stillness. Elena turned away from the mirrors. For the first time in nearly a year. She walked toward the training mat. Every pair of eyes in Iron Summit Dojo slowly shifted to the quiet maintenance worker. For nearly a year, Elena Vance had blended into the background so completely that most people barely noticed when she entered a room. Now she walked calmly across the blue mats, her pace steady and unhurried, until she stopped beside Malik Brooks. The teenager kept his head lowered, his fists clenched at his sides. Elena offered him a small, reassuring smile. "You don't have to become perfect today," she said softly. "You only have to become better than yesterday." Malik finally looked up. "But, maybe he's right." "He isn't." Her voice remained gentle. "The students who improve the most are usually the ones who struggle at the beginning. Don't let one difficult day decide who you become." Naomi looked at Elena with quiet gratitude. It was the first encouraging thing anyone had said since they walked through the dojo doors. Grant folded his arms. "Finished?" Elena turned toward him. Grant chuckled, shaking his head as though the situation amused him. "I don't remember asking the maintenance staff to coach my students." A few students laughed awkwardly. Grant took another step forward. "You mop floors." His smile widened. "You wipe mirrors." He glanced around the room, inviting everyone into the joke. "That's the only thing you're qualified to do." Several students laughed louder this time, though a few looked uncomfortable. The parents exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the conversation had crossed a line. Elena never reacted. She simply stood beside Malik, her expression calm. Grant smirked. "What is it?" he asked sarcastically. "Are you planning to teach martial arts now?" For a brief moment, the dojo became completely still. Elena met Grant's eyes. "Only if someone forgets what martial arts are supposed to teach." The words were quiet. There was no anger behind them. No accusation. Only calm certainty. The laughter vanished. Even the students who had been smiling moments earlier fell silent. Grant's expression hardened. "So," he said slowly, "you think you understand martial arts better than I do?" "I didn't say that." "But you implied it." He took another step closer. "Fine." A confident grin returned to his face. "Tomorrow evening." He pointed toward the center of the training mat. "In front of every student." He glanced toward the parents. "And every parent. We'll have a demonstration." His eyes settled on Elena. "You and me." The room filled with stunned silence. Grant expected hesitation. An apology. An excuse. Instead, Elena nodded once. "I'll be here." Nothing more. She turned, picked up her mop, and quietly resumed cleaning as though nothing unusual had happened. The students stared after her. The parents whispered among themselves. Grant smiled, convinced he had just guaranteed an easy victory. Only one person wasn't smiling. Standing near the back of the dojo, Grant's senior student, Owen Mercer, watched Elena carefully as she walked away. There had been no fear in her voice. No uncertainty in her steps. For reasons he couldn't yet explain. That troubled him. The whispers didn't stop after Elena walked away. They followed Grant Caldwell as students gathered around him, eager to talk about the match scheduled for the following evening. "You'll finish it in seconds, Sensei," one of the older students said with a grin. Grant laughed. "I won't need seconds." The group chuckled. "I've sparred national champions," Grant continued confidently. "Do you really think someone who spends her evenings pushing a mop is going to surprise me?" More laughter followed. Grant wasn't being cruel anymore. He genuinely believed what he was saying. To him, tomorrow's demonstration was nothing more than an opportunity to remind everyone who led Iron Summit Dojo. Across the room, however, Owen Mercer wasn't listening. His attention remained fixed on Elena as she quietly finished cleaning the mirrors. Something about her refused to make sense. As she reached for a towel, Owen noticed the rough calluses covering her knuckles. Not the kind that came from hard labor. The kind built over years of striking heavy bags and wooden training posts. He watched the way she carried herself. Her shoulders stayed relaxed. Her back remained perfectly straight. Every movement flowed naturally into the next without wasted effort. Even as she bent to pick up a cleaning cloth, her balance never shifted. Years of martial arts had trained Owen to recognize discipline when he saw it. Then he noticed something else. Her breathing. Slow. Steady. Controlled. Exactly the way experienced fighters calm themselves before stepping onto the mat. A quiet uneasiness settled in his chest. When Grant walked past, Owen lowered his voice. "Sensei." Grant looked over. "I think she's trained before." Grant smiled without slowing his stride. "Everyone thinks they know how to fight." "No," Owen replied. "I mean seriously." Grant waved him off. "You're overthinking it." "Maybe." But Owen couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would not unfold the way Grant expected. Later that evening, after the last students had gone home, Victor Hale found Elena stacking folded towels inside the equipment room. The older dojo owner leaned against the doorway. "You accepted that challenge awfully quickly." Elena smiled faintly. "I did." Victor hesitated. "If you win, what do you want?" She looked at him, surprised by the question. "I've seen these things before," Victor said. "People usually ask for money, a promotion, or someone else's position." Elena quietly shook her head. "I don't want any of that." "What, then?" She answered without hesitation. "Malik stays." Victor listened. "And no beginner is ever humiliated in front of this class again." The words hung in the silence. Nothing for herself. Everything for someone else. Victor studied her for a long moment. Who are you? He wondered. Years earlier, the martial arts world had known that answer. Elena Vance had once stood at the top of international full-contact karate, winning championship after championship without suffering a single defeat. Her name had appeared in magazines, tournament broadcasts, and training halls across the world. Then she uncovered corruption hidden behind the medals. Officials chose winners before matches were fought. Selections bought instead of earned. When Elena refused to stay silent, she walked away from the sport she loved rather than compromise her principles. She disappeared from public life. Iron Summit Dojo became her refuge. Cleaning its floors allowed her to remain close to martial arts, without ever returning to the spotlight. Tomorrow, for the first time in years, Elena Vance would step back onto a competition mat. The following evening, Iron Summit Dojo felt different. Long before the scheduled demonstration, the parking lot was already filled with cars. Parents who normally arrive just before class came nearly half an hour early, hoping to find a good place to watch. Students gathered in small groups near the entrance, their conversations reduced to excited whispers. Do you think she'll actually show up? I heard she accepted without even thinking. Sensei Grant's going to end this in 10 seconds. The rumors had spread faster than anyone expected. What began as an embarrassing challenge during yesterday's class had become the only thing anyone wanted to talk about. Inside the dojo, the blue mats had been freshly cleaned, and folding chairs lined one side of the room for parents and visitors. The mirrors reflected a growing crowd, while the international flags hanging overhead seemed to watch silently over everything below. Grant Caldwell stepped onto the mat with the confidence of a man who had already imagined the outcome. He stretched his shoulders, rolled his neck, practiced a series of sharp punches and controlled kicks. Every movement was clean and precise. Several students watched with admiration. Sensei looks ready, one whispered. He always is, another replied. Grant caught fragments of their conversation and smiled to himself. He wasn't nervous. He saw tonight as another lesson. One that would remind everyone why he stood at the front of the dojo. Near the back of the room, however, Owen Mercer couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had followed him since yesterday. His eyes repeatedly drifted toward the entrance. He wasn't waiting for the match. He was waiting for Elena. The front door opened. Conversation stopped. Elena Vance walked inside carrying the same yellow cleaning bucket and mop she brought every evening. She wore the same fitted black athletic shirt, black leggings, and simple sneakers. Her expression hadn't changed. Calm. Quiet. Untroubled. Without acknowledging the whispers surrounding her, she crossed the room exactly as she always did. She placed the bucket neatly against the wall. Leaned the mop beside it. Then, without a word, she slipped off her sneakers. The soft sound of bare feet touching the blue mat echoed through the silent dojo. No one laughed. No one whispered. Every eye followed her as she stepped toward the center of the training floor. Victor Hale walked between Grant and Elena, raising one hand for everyone's attention. I want everyone to remember why we're here, he said calmly. This is a demonstration of skill, discipline, and respect. There will be no cheering for injuries, no insults, and no unnecessary aggression. Martial arts exist to build character, not destroy it. The room answered with quiet nods. Grant rolled his shoulders once more and smiled confidently at Elena. I'm ready whenever you are. Elena simply inclined her head. Victor stepped backward. The dojo held its breath. The match began. If you're already rooting for Elena, let me know in the comments. Would you have accepted Grant's challenge, or walked away? I'd love to hear what you think. Now, the match was about to begin. Victor Hale lowered his hand. Begin. Grant Caldwell wasted no time. He stepped forward with the confidence of a man determined to prove a point, closing the distance between them in an instant. His first strike came fast, followed immediately by a sharp kick aimed at Elena's side. She wasn't there. She hadn't jumped. She hadn't rushed away. She had simply taken one quiet step to the side. The movement was so small that several students blinked, wondering if they had somehow missed it. Grant pivoted immediately, throwing another combination. Left hand. Right hand. Front kick. Again. Nothing. Elena remained calm, her breathing slow and steady, as though she were walking through an ordinary evening instead of standing in the middle of a public challenge. She never lifted her guard aggressively. She never looked tense. She simply moved. Each step was effortless. Each turn perfectly balanced. Each adjustment came a fraction of a second before Grant's attack arrived. The dojo fell strangely quiet. Parents who had expected an easy victory for Grant stopped whispering. The smiles slowly disappeared from their faces. Students exchanged confused glances. "Why can't he hit her?" one boy whispered. I don't know," another answered. Grant heard neither of them. His concentration narrowed completely. He increased his speed. His punches became sharper. His kicks came from different angles. Yet every attack met empty space. Elena wasn't retreating. She wasn't running. She controlled the distance with remarkable precision, always standing just beyond the reach of each strike. It looked almost effortless. As though she already knew exactly where Grant intended to move. Grant's jaw tightened. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. This wasn't supposed to happen. Across the room, Owen Mercer leaned forward. His eyes followed Elena's feet instead of her hands. There was something hauntingly familiar about the way she moved. No wasted motion. No unnecessary force. Every step served a purpose. Every breath remained perfectly measured. It wasn't defensive. It was disciplined. Like watching someone who had repeated the same movements thousands upon thousands of times. A memory tugged at the edge of Owen's mind. He had seen footwork like this before. Not inside local dojos. On much bigger stages. Grant's frustration finally broke through his confidence. "If you're going to fight," he snapped, "then fight." Elena's expression never changed. "I am." Her quiet answer somehow echoed louder than shouting. The room became still once more. Grant clenched his fists. Enough. He planted his feet, drew a deep breath, and launched into the strongest spinning attack he knew, putting every ounce of speed, balance, and power behind it. Gasps rose from the crowd. Owen's eyes widened. For the first time since the demonstration began. Elena moved. Elena moved. Not with speed alone. With perfect timing. As Grant Caldwell's spinning attack swept toward her, Elena stepped just outside its path, turning her body with effortless precision. Before Grant could recover, she gently redirected the momentum of his kick with the palm of her hand. It was almost invisible. No wasted force. No dramatic strike. Just flawless technique. Grant's balance disappeared. His own momentum carried him forward until his feet left the mat. A heartbeat later. Thud. He landed flat on the blue training floor. The sound echoed across the silent dojo. A collective gasp swept through the room. Several parents instinctively rose halfway from their chairs. Students stared with wide eyes. No one had ever seen their sensei thrown so cleanly. Grant blinked in disbelief. For a moment, he simply lay there, trying to understand what had happened. Then pride pulled him back to his feet. His face burned with embarrassment. Without waiting for Victor's instruction, he charged again. This time there was no confidence. Only frustration. His punches came faster. Harder. Less controlled. He launched combinations from every angle, determined to erase what everyone had just witnessed. Elena remained exactly as she had been from the beginning. Calm. Balanced. Patient. She neither struck nor retaliated. Each attack met empty space. Every punch slipped harmlessly past her shoulder. Every kick found nothing but air. The crowd stopped reacting altogether. Instead, they watched in complete silence, trying to understand how one person could make years of disciplined training look so effortless. Grant's breathing grew heavier. His movements lost their rhythm. His determination slowly became desperation. With one final shout, he lunged forward, throwing everything he had into a reckless straight punch. This time, Elena didn't step away. She caught his wrist. Firmly. Effortlessly. The motion ended before anyone fully realized it had begun. Grant tried to pull free. He couldn't. Elena gently lowered his arm. Then she placed her free hand lightly against his shoulder. There was no anger in her eyes. No satisfaction. Only quiet disappointment. She spoke softly enough that no one expected the entire dojo to hear. A sensei doesn't fight to prove he's stronger. Grant looked into her eyes. The word struck harder than any technique could have. In that instant, he saw the frightened face of Malik Brooks. He remembered the laughter. The humiliation. The students he had criticized. The confidence he had slowly taken away from those who trusted him to build it. His shoulders dropped. The anger vanished. So did his pride. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke again. An almost unbelievable silence settled over Iron Summit Dojo. No student whispered. No parent applauded. Even Victor Hale remained perfectly still. It felt as though time itself had stopped. Near the back of the room, Owen Mercer stared at Elena's stance, the angle of her shoulders, the calm expression that hadn't changed since the match began. Then, like lightning breaking through a storm, a memory finally surfaced. His eyes widened. He knew exactly who she was. No one dared to break the silence. Grant Caldwell remained frozen where he stood, Elena's words echoing in his mind. A sensei doesn't fight to prove he's stronger. Then, from the back of the dojo, a quiet voice spoke. It can't be. Every head turned toward Owen Mercer. His eyes never left Elena. I've seen those movements before. He took a slow step forward, shaking his head in disbelief. The footwork, the timing, the way you redirect instead of overpower. His voice caught in his throat. I watched those matches years ago. Another step. His eyes widened. You're Elena Vance. The name hung in the air. Silence returned even heavier than before. Victor Hale stared at Elena as though seeing her for the first time. Elena Vance, he repeated quietly. The undefeated international karate champion? Elena said nothing. That silence was answer enough. Parents immediately reached for their phones. Within seconds, quiet gasps spread through the room. I found her. Oh my goodness. That's really her. Old championship photographs filled their screens. A younger Elena standing atop podiums. Gold medals around her neck. Newspaper headlines celebrating another international victory. Tournament footage showing the same effortless movement they had just witnessed only moments earlier. The same calm eyes. The same flawless balance. One father looked from his phone to Elena and back again. I can't believe it. Around the dojo, students stood speechless. The woman they had walked past almost every evening. The woman carrying a mop and cleaning bucket. Had once been one of the greatest karate champions in the world. Grant slowly lowered his head. The realization settled over him like an unbearable weight. He hadn't challenged an ordinary maintenance worker. He had mocked someone whose achievements far exceeded his own. Victor finally found his voice. Why? Elena looked around the room. Not on the phone. Not at the stunned faces. Only to the students. I didn't disappear because someone defeated me, she said quietly. I left because I refused to become part of something that no longer honored what martial arts are supposed to represent. The room listened in complete silence. There were tournaments where winners were chosen before the matches even began. She paused. Officials asked people to stay quiet. I couldn't. So I walked away. She folded her hands calmly in front of her. I lost my career. But I kept my integrity. Her eyes settled on Malik. Winning means very little if you lose yourself in the process. She looked back toward Grant. Martial arts were never meant to make us feel superior. They exist to protect. To encourage. To teach discipline with compassion. The strongest fighter in any room should also be the safest person in that room. Not a single person spoke. Several parents quietly wiped away tears. Malik stood a little taller than he had the day before. Grant's vision blurred. A tear rolled down his cheek. Then another. He made no attempt to hide them. The weight of his pride, his words, and his failures crashed down all at once. Slowly. With trembling steps. Grant began walking toward Elena. Grant stopped a few feet in front of Elena. The dojo remained silent. Every student. Every parent. Every instructor waited to see what would happen next. For the first time since anyone could remember, Grant Caldwell bowed his head before someone else. I'm sorry. His voice trembled. He turned to Elena first. I judged you by your job instead of your character. I confused confidence with superiority. I forgot that respect has to be earned every single day. He took a slow breath before facing Malik. I'm sorry for embarrassing you. You came here looking for guidance. I gave you doubt instead. Malik nodded quietly, the hurt in his eyes finally beginning to fade. Grant then looked at Naomi. No parent should have to watch their child lose confidence because of a teacher. I'm truly sorry. Naomi offered a small, forgiving smile. Grant turned toward the students lining the edge of the mat. I told you martial arts would make you stronger. He lowered his eyes. But strength without kindness isn't strength at all. I should have been building your confidence instead of testing your pride. Finally, he faced Victor Hale. I failed the standards this dojo was built on. I thought leadership meant being the strongest person in the room. He shook his head slowly. I understand now. Leadership means serving the people who trust you. It requires humility before authority. Victor stepped forward and placed a hand on Grant's shoulder. The important thing, he said gently, is that you were willing to learn. He turned toward Elena. Iron Summit Dojo could use someone who remembers what martial arts are truly about. He smiled warmly. Elena. I'd like to offer you a permanent position as an instructor. The room erupted into applause. Students smiled. Parents nodded enthusiastically. Even those who had laughed the day before now stood on their feet, clapping with genuine admiration. Grant looked at Elena once more. His voice was quieter than before. Would you? He hesitated. Teach me? A gentle smile finally appeared on Elena's face. She nodded. Every sensei is still a student. Grant smiled through his tears. For the first time in years. He felt like one. If this story reminded you that true strength comes from humility, consider subscribing for more inspiring stories like this. And if you enjoyed this one, there's another powerful story waiting for you on the screen right now. Several weeks later, Iron Summit Dojo felt like a different place. Laughter still echoed across the blue mats. But it was no longer laughter at someone's mistakes. It was the sound of students encouraging one another. Malik Brooks no longer stood at the back of the class. He trained with growing confidence, knowing that every mistake was simply another step toward improvement. Whenever a beginner struggled, Grant no longer criticized. He knelt beside them. Corrected their technique with patience. Celebrated every small improvement. Across the room, Elena taught alongside him, her quiet wisdom becoming part of every lesson. Word spread beyond the city. People no longer spoke of Iron Summit as the dojo that produced the toughest fighters. They spoke of it as the place where people discovered confidence, humility, and purpose. Because medals fade. Trophies gather dust. But the lessons that shape a person's character can last a lifetime. People often mistake confidence for strength and kindness for weakness. But true martial artists understand that the greatest victories are not won by defeating others, they are won by lifting others up. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one nobody thought to notice. And sometimes, the lesson that changes an entire community begins with one quiet person refusing to stay silent. I hope you enjoy the story. I will see you in the next one.